Hello, I welcome you to this program, The Living Earth, with me, Tracy Uzigwe. The program is a program that talks about the environment and sustainable livelihood. And when we talk about our environment, we mean everything that has to do with our ability to live on this planet, this one support system that God Himself has given to us to live and survive in. How do we go about that? Our daily activities, our daily footprints on this environment, so that at the end of the day, we're able to live effectively and have something that can be handed over to the next generation for them to be able to live in and express themselves effectively as well. Talking about sustainability in regards to the environment. And when we're talking about the environment, it's not just something that is vague. You need to consider the air, the quality of the air you breathe. You need to consider the plants around you, how effectively are you taking note of how they are doing? Because as much as that seems to be like a secondary thing to most developing countries, is a key indicator of how good an environment is. The water you drink is a major key component of this, not just the one you drink, for both domestic and other uses. So the holistic environment is what this program is driven towards looking at. How are you going about it day in, day out? Because if you're not taking note of it, one day the environment may just wind up on all of us and we'll not be able to survive on it any longer. So climate change, what exactly is climate change? How close is climate change to everybody, really, so that it doesn't look like it's the science-driven thing, it's for the scientists, or it's for the environmentalists, or it's for the politicians? How close is climate change to your doorstep, and how is it affecting you day in, day out? I have Professor HILARY INYANG.
Thank you.
Yeah, Prof is the former Duke Distinguished Energy Professor of Environmental Engineering, University of North Carolina, USA, and he has chaired several boards and environmental organizations around the globe. So Prof is going to be telling us a whole lot around what we are looking at today, talking about climate change. Prof, in a very minimal layman way, what is climate change?
Well, climate change can be looked at by lay people on the basis of changes in the environment that derive from changes in temperature and a whole lot of impacts that manifest because of that. So climate change is a change in climate because of processes, natural processes that have been influenced by human beings. That's how we look at climate change. At least the climate change, the fraction of climate change that is caused by humans. Climate has always changed over time. In fact, even before humans came to this earth. Unfortunately, since the dawn of the Industrial Revolution about 200-300 years ago, humans have impacted the environment to the extent that temperature has increased a lot, and there are many other things that come along with increase in temperature. So the environmental changes that have happened because of global warming is what we generally refer to as climate change.
Okay, maybe you need to be a little bit more, let's get backward a bit again about how does that increase in temperature actually happen? How does the Industrial Revolution translate to increase in temperature?
There are two important questions you've asked. The first one, how does that actually happen? Well, what happens is that there is radiation coming from the sun onto this earth, and that radiation is reflected on the surface of the earth. So there are certain components of that radiation that is given back to space through reflection, and the extent to which that reflected radiation travels back to space is very important. So if you have some gases that absorb the certain aspects of the radiation, such that the envelope of gases, the atmosphere, that surrounds the Earth warms up. It heats up the Earth. So that's what we call global warming. In other words, if this atmosphere that surrounds the Earth contains so much of these greenhouse gases, so these greenhouse gases are able to absorb this radiation that is reflected from the surface and warm up the envelope of gases that surround the Earth. This is what we call the atmosphere. So every the Earth warms up, our environment warms up, and that increase in temperature affects many natural processes. And this is what is called global warming, because increase in that temperature has effects on weather conditions. It has effects eventually on our streams, on dust generation, on precipitation, rainfall, annual rainfall. And that could have impacts on flooding, has impacts on coastal erosion, and a whole lot of things in the economy of many countries.
Yes, so before we get down to what the causes are, like what we get to see when the environment is heated up, talk to us a little bit about what makes the gases or the things in the atmosphere that makes this reflection from the sun not to easily get back to space, which is eventually what translates to why the Earth is getting hotter or warmer.
Excellent question. You see that before the dawn of the Industrial Revolution, mostly in Europe and other parts of the world, I mean, Africa was not a very big factor in that then. But you see, industrial processes operate with machines, and these machines take hydrocarbon fuel and then burn it up and speed carbon dioxide, nitrous oxide, and many other compounds into the atmosphere. So those are the gases, primarily carbon dioxide, that get into the atmosphere and cause this global warming to manifest. It's not just the industrial processes. You have transportation, you have buses, you have trains, you have ships. You have many other things like in agriculture that emit this carbon dioxide. You have vehicles, millions and millions of them. That's why sometimes in some countries have emission standards for vehicles, right? And all sorts of control processes for other things. Yes, the more a society industrializes, the more it burns fuel that emits a lot of these substances that are greenhouse gases into the atmosphere.
So the major implication in all this, among these gases that you've mentioned now, is carbon dioxide. It absorbs a lot of this radiation from the sun that gets to the air that it needs to be reflected back into the atmosphere. It traps a bulk of it and gets the environment to get heated up.
Yes. So that is why any reduction or mitigation plan on global climate change always focuses on minimization of use of carbon. That's the translation from carbon to other kinds of fuel that are less polluting.
Okay, so now let's get to where you were going to. Before we say let's explain this better, let's get to how this heating up of the environment is affecting almost every aspect of our daily and national life.
Well, you know what defines the economy of a place? Many sectors. You have the health sector, the energy sector, the construction sector, you have the environmental sector, you have the tourism sector. Because global climate change has very profound impacts on the environment. So an economy depends on the environment, be it exploitation of natural resources, be it fishing, be it any of those. Let's speak for example, the health sector.
Yeah.
What the implication of global climate change is, I can give with just one example. You know that certain pests like certain temperature and humidity conditions. So if certain pests were used to being at a location, and then here comes global climate change induced changes in temperature in various regimes, say that mosquitoes were only in the lowland places, but global climate change comes and changes the temperature regime so that those mosquitoes that used to be at a certain location now migrate to other places because conditions, ecological conditions have been provided, altered. So this is why you have such things as migration. And of course, when those mosquitoes migrate there, some of them are Anopheles mosquitoes that can cause malaria. So what you can have is a translation of disease from one location to the other because the ecology has changed in such a way that certain pests now migrate. And this has implications on agriculture, for example. If pests migrate to farms at locations where pests never used to be, that has implications. Also rainfall season may be displaced because of global climate change. What this means is that farmers may not have enough precipitation in some places while they have excessive precipitation in others. You see how that impacts agricultural productivity. So those are just merely two examples. Of course, any mitigation approach taken in the energy sector has a lot of implications on communities, not just for civil activities, for industrial activities as well. So the transition from carbon fuel to non-carbon fuel has a lot of implications on affordability of energy for households and affordability of energy for the industrial sector. Those are merely a few examples.
Wow, so invariably, from what Prof is saying, the impact or the effect of climate change is almost interwoven in all aspects of our daily life as human, because you've talked about health now, you talked about agriculture, food security, you talked about water when you say the rivers drying up, and then energy. There's a whole lot that this has implication in the issues around the environment getting heated up. So we're going to be picking it one after the other and try to digress a bit on how this can play out and what we need to do to start cutting down. Because when we go, countries go to get to sign into several treaties and agreements talking about cutting down carbon, when this is not made open or plain in a way that an everyday person appreciates his or her role in it, the chances of achieving it is very vague. So let's look at it let's talk about it in two major dimensions. Let's look at it at mitigation and adaptation. Yes. So for smaller communities, let's start off from there and on individual basis. Which works better? Is it mitigation or adaptation? How does that?
First, because mitigation and adaptation are some English words, so we have to sort of define what they are within the context of global climate change. In the context of global climate change, mitigation is the intervention at what I would call the upfront stage, where you have the emissions. So what can be done to reduce emissions that get into the atmosphere? Things like changing fuel, things that looking at machines that may operate a different way. For example, folks are looking at hydrogen. Some people are going to alternative energy sources like wind, like solar. All those constitute mitigation of global climate change. So they are interventions at the upfront level. But the other one is adaptation. That is, we recognize that a lot of these impacts have already happened and are likely to happen. And developing countries are not the places, but have a lot of industrialization, have all these machines that spit carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. So the best that the developing communities of the type that you are talking about can do is to find ways of living with the impacts of global climate change, implementing systems that reduce the impacts so that you don't have all those things I talked about with health, with the economy, with tourism. That is adaptation. The common person in small communities can institute things in the area of agriculture, can move away from rain-fed agriculture, can control the migration of mosquitoes by not allowing habitats that allow those mosquitoes to come in. So there are many things like that. Okay, there are things that they can do with respect to occupational transitions.